Hello. It's been a little while. Well, between periods of burnout, a run-in with COVID back in early October, and a bit of disillusionment after seeing a friend of mine's YouTube account finally get monetized and seeing how little he's making off of it, you could say I've lost a little incentive to put content out on a regular basis. Anyway, I've decided to go ahead and put out another album ranking video. To be honest, I had planned to do this anyway, but for a while there I wasn't sure which band to cover next out of my music collection. I was considering going for the throat, as it were, by covering a group that would generate a lot of views, the Beatles for instance. But then I had a sudden, shall we say, craving to re-listen to music by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and it finally hit me. They should be next. So this will be a shorter ranking video than the last one. First, some background on how I got into them. I had, of course, heard some of their best-known songs on the radio growing up, and around the time I was starting college, I happened on my dad's CD copy of a best-of compilation of ELP songs. Using a CD burner, I copied the disc so I could explore the tracks. From there, it just kind of snowballed, and by mid-college I had most of their main catalog in my CD collection. Moving on to the rankings, bear in mind this is my opinion, not yours. Don't get upset if my rankings are different. Number 10. In the Hot Seat. Well, bland, and bland is how I describe all this. None of the songs left much of an impression with me, and at certain points the album just doesn't sound much like Emerson, Lake and Palmer should. I can't even pick out a favorite song because I really don't have one. Number 9. Love Beach. Well, before we even get to the music, let's talk about that album cover. Were they trying to look like the Bee Gees? It's atrocious. Only reason I can think of is that they recorded the album while on tax exile in the Bahamas, but that's not much of an excuse. As to the content itself, well, most of it sounds like what the album largely is, contract filler. Side 1 is nearly all radio-friendly stuff, none of which really resonates with me. Side 2 features the lengthy Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman, a decent but not amazing long-form piece. The best piece overall on this album is the closer for Side 1, a cover of Canario by Spanish composer Joaquin Rodrigo. Number 8. Works Volume 1. In terms of listening through the full albums, I'll admit this one was a bear to get through on my first listen. The album's 4 sides are so drastically different. Side 1 is a long classical piece written by Keith Emerson. Side 2 is Greg Lake compositions, many of them ballads. Side 3 is mostly conventional rock songs written by Carl Palmer, and Side 4 is a couple of long band pieces. But there's still some good tunes scattered throughout. Number 7. Black Moon. After a 14-year stretch of hiatus, solo projects, and semi-reunions, this came out in the early 90s. And it's a fairly good album, despite it feeling like they put all the oomph into the first half of the album, and it's just running on fumes by the end. Still, there's a few good ballads scattered throughout. There's a pointed attack on unfettered capitalism in Paper Blood that's still very relevant today, and both the title track and their cover of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet are good throwbacks to their more prog-heavy early days. Number 6. Works Volume 2. The fact that this is more concise and contains a few holdovers from the brain salad surgery sessions are what make it outstrip Volume 1, in my opinion. Plus, I like how it's a little more stylistically varied from track to track rather than side to side. There's prog rock, there's barrel house, there's ragtime, there's ballads, there's marching pieces. It's like a shorter, bizarro white album. Overall, it feels more like a group effort, even if it really isn't. Number 5. Tarkus. I'm glad to say this album's awesomeness doesn't end when the side-long title track does. But even if it had, it still would have brought us the greatness that is Tarkus, a sprawling 20-minute piece about the futility of conflict, as Greg Lake put it. Most of Side 2 is great, with only Jeremy Bender and Are You Ready, Eddie being the duds. Number 4. Brain Salad Surgery. Probably the band's most iconic album for 2 reasons. The cover art, designed by H.R. Giger, yes, that H.R. Giger, and the side-and-a-half 3-part epic Carnival 9. Most of the songs here are great. Benny the Bouncer is really the only weak one, but it's still fun. And Carnival 9 is a romp from start to finish, even if the story of the piece is incredibly vague. This album is a lot like its predecessor, Trilogy, but clearly leans more heavily into the prog side of things. Number 3, Trilogy. This album is an excellent blend of the band at their most commercial while still retaining their prog rock flavor. My only real complaint is that the band seems to have run out of steam by the last 2 songs. But that in no way tarnishes the strongest material. That is, the title track, the gunslinging adventure of the sheriff, the blaringly awesome cover of Aaron Copland's Hoedown, which is probably better known to some as the Beef Council theme from those commercials in the early 90s, and the quiet, subtle Greg Lake ballad from the beginning. Number 2, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. The band's self-titled debut is a perfect illustration of the band's sonic landscape. Inclusion of classical pieces, references to more classical pieces, some of Keith Emerson's finest keyboard work alongside the band's first big hit, Lucky Man. None of the songs are weak, and it provided the standard by which all future ELP albums would be measured by. Number 1, Pictures at an Exhibition. This is the only live album on the list. It's probably considered a bit blasphemous by classical music enthusiasts, but I think the band did an amazing job adapting what they did of Modest Mussorgsky's original suite. The added prog rock lyrics are as vague as prog can be, but they're amazing. The band's musicianship is as tight as ever, and the non-classical material they added to the show is both the icing on the cake and a nice extra layer. If you're a fan of prog rock, well, I could recommend around half of ELP's main discography, but this album is the one I would recommend the most. Well, that's all of them. I'll probably continue these ranking videos. I'll try to get them out about every 2 months or so. Thanks for watching.